You can feel it tonight, that quiet tension between comfort and something missing. The kind of silence that doesn't hurt, but somehow still feels heavy. Maybe you're lying beside someone right now and you can hear them breathe, but it doesn't feel like closeness anymore. It just feels like two people existing in the same room, out of habit, out of memory, out of something that used to feel like love. And it's strange, isn't it? Because nothing is wrong. There's no fight, no betrayal, no dramatic ending, just a slow fading of color, like watching the sunset and not realizing when it turned dark. So tonight, we're not here to fix anything. We're not here to blame. We're here to notice, to slow down enough to see what's been quietly dying beneath the surface. That delicate thread between love and friendship, between warmth and distance, between us and me. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to force understanding. Just breathe. Let the noise in your head drift for a while. The world outside can wait. This moment is just for you. Because sometimes the hardest truths don't scream, they whisper. And if you listen closely enough, you might finally hear what your heart has been trying to say for a very long time. So, take a deep breath and let it all go for now. The need to fix, the urge to rush, the pretending that everything's fine. Tonight, we're just going to sit with honesty, quietly, gently, until it feels safe to look at it. Maybe this is what growing apart really feels like. Not a storm, not a fight, just a quiet evening where the distance feels normal. You used to look at them and feel electricity in your chest. Now you just feel peace, and somewhere inside, that peace doesn't feel peaceful at all. It's confusing, isn't it? Because on paper, everything looks right. You still talk, still share meals, you even laugh sometimes. But underneath, something has changed. You can sense it, that subtle emotional drift, like two boats slowly pulling away from each other in calm water. No sound, no waves, just space. This is the moment when love stops shouting and starts whispering, and most people don't notice. They think it's maturity, they call it stability. But what if it's not? What if that quiet between you isn't peace, but distance wearing a gentle disguise? The truth is, there's a point in every relationship where comfort becomes camouflage, where you stop asking questions because the answers might hurt, where you start telling yourself it's fine because the alternative feels too heavy to face. But tonight, we're going to face it softly, not through blame or fear, but through awareness. We'll explore how passion turns into politeness, how connection fades into companionship, and how two people can love each other deeply yet slowly forget how to feel each other. No judgment, no noise, just gentle honesty. So before we begin, take a slow breath in, hold it, and exhale everything you've been carrying. This isn't a breakup story. It's a story about noticing, about finally seeing what your heart has been too tired to name. Because awareness, even when it hurts, is always the first step back to truth. Now, let's begin. With the moment love starts to fade, not loudly, but quietly. There's a moment in every relationship that rarely announces itself. It doesn't come with an argument or a confession. It comes quietly, like a dimming light that you almost don't notice, until one night you realize the room isn't as warm as it used to be. You used to feel it, that pulse between you, a rhythm that lived in the small things, the way they looked at you before speaking, how their laughter seemed to find yours in every conversation. But now, everything feels muted. You still talk, still share space, still exchange the same words, but the words don't glow anymore. It's subtle at first. You brush it off. You tell yourself it's just stress, or work, or exhaustion. But deep down, something feels slightly off, like the emotional temperature has dropped a few degrees. The touch that used to spark something now feels routine. The silence that once felt comfortable now feels empty. That's how emotional drift begins. Not with distance, but with numbness, with 1,000 tiny moments where connection used to live, and now it doesn't. The good morning kiss becomes an automatic gesture. The laughter becomes an echo of how it used to sound. And love, without anyone meaning to, becomes a polite coexistence. This is the space between two people who still care, but have stopped feeling. And the danger of that space is that it looks calm. It even feels safe. You convince yourself that this is what mature love is supposed to look like. Quiet, stable, familiar. But in truth, it's a quiet decay, one that doesn't hurt at first, because it numbs before it wounds. The mind, after all, loves patterns. It seeks what's predictable, because predictability feels like safety. And when you've been with someone long enough, Your nervous system learns their presence like a song it no longer needs to listen to. The melody is still there, but it stops moving you. Sometimes it's not that love dies, it just stops being felt. You still love them in the abstract, but that spark of aliveness, that rush that makes love feel like movement, fades into the background hum of routine. And maybe that's the hardest truth to accept, that love doesn't always leave with a crash. Sometimes it fades in silence, with both of you smiling, laughing, living, but no longer touching the same way, no longer seeing each other fully. You can share the same bed, the same plans, the same life, and still feel oceans apart. Because connection isn't about proximity, it's about presence. And presence requires effort. It requires noticing. It requires waking up each day and choosing to see your partner as if they renew again, as if you're still curious. But when curiosity fades, so does connection. So if lately your warmth feels lukewarm, if the silence feels heavier than usual, don't ignore it. That faint chill you feel between you, it's not the end yet, but it's the beginning of something asking to be seen. Maybe the light hasn't gone out. Maybe it's just waiting for you to notice that it's fading. What happens inside us when love stops feeling alive? It's not sudden, it's chemical, psychological, spiritual, a quiet rewiring that happens when the brain begins to confuse love with safety, and safety with silence. The truth is, your nervous system has been studying your partner since the very beginning. Every tone of voice, every pattern of touch, every look, all recorded and mapped like a familiar road. At first, that familiarity feels comforting. It calms your body, tells your brain you're safe. But over time, the same signals that once brought excitement begin to flatten out. It's called emotional habituation, the mind's way of adapting to what it already knows. What once thrilled you becomes predictable, and what's predictable stops activating the parts of your brain responsible for passion and curiosity. You don't fall out of love, you fall out of novelty. The brain is a creature of contrast. It craves variation, not chaos, but rhythm. When every day starts to feel the same, when the conversations loop, when the gestures repeat like a song you've played too many times, your emotional system stops responding. It's not rejection, it's adaptation. And that's where many couples mistake calm for connection. They say, we've matured, but often they've just grown numb. Because there's a difference between peace and paralysis. Peace is alive, it breathes, it listens, it moves softly but intentionally. Paralysis feels like stillness on the surface, but beneath it is a quiet emptiness, a body that's present, but a heart that's stopped reacting. Our bodies know before our minds do. They sense when touch stops carrying energy, when words lose emotional texture, when presence becomes background noise. And yet, we stay, because leaving feels dramatic, and naming it feels cruel. So we normalize the numbness. We call it stability. We tell ourselves it's just a phase. But numbness, left unchecked, becomes the slow death of intimacy. And here's the paradox. The more we crave safety, the less alive love feels. Because true connection needs a spark of unpredictability, a dose of surprise, a moment of not knowing exactly how the other person will respond. That's what keeps the emotional system awake. That's what keeps desire breathing. You can't schedule intimacy. You can't rehearse curiosity. It has to be felt, renewed each day through awareness, through noticing the details again, through remembering what used to make your heartbeat quicken. Sometimes it's not about trying harder, but seeing deeper, looking at them not as who they've become in your routine, but as the person you once discovered. With wonder, with awe, with the willingness to be surprised. Love doesn't die when the excitement fades. It dies when attention fades, because attention is love's oxygen. And most relationships suffocate not from betrayal or distance, but from the slow, unnoticed loss of curiosity. So if you've been wondering why everything feels fine, but not alive, that's your sign. Your mind has gone into autopilot, and love can't live there. To feel again, you don't need to find someone new. You just need to look again, to breathe, to listen, to wake up the part of you that once paid attention like it was sacred. Because the truth is simple, and brutal, and freeing all at once. What you don't nurture doesn't leave you, it just stops growing. There's something haunting about the way routine quietly replaces romance. It doesn't ask permission. It just happens, one small habit at a time. You wake up next to the same face, but you no longer see it. You say good morning, the way you've said it 1,000 times, but your voice no longer carries warmth, it carries rhythm, rehearsed rhythm. the kind that feels safe, but hollow. You move through your days together like dancers who still know the steps, but have forgotten the music. Every motion is correct, every line practiced, and yet there's something missing, something that once gave it meaning. It used to feel electric, even in silence. Now, it feels efficient. You talk about what to buy, what to fix, what to plan. You text to coordinate, not to connect. You touch, but without intention. You hug, but without hunger. It's not that the love is gone. It's that the rituals that once expressed it have lost their soul. You've turned the sacred into the practical. You make dinner, but you don't sit to taste it together. You ask, "How was your day?" but don't stay for the answer. You say, "I love you," but mostly out of memory. A soft, polite phrase that used to carry a spark. Now, it's a habit, a gentle echo of what once felt like fire. And what's dangerous about this is how normal it feels. You convince yourself that this is what long-term love is supposed to be, a quiet companionship, a steady rhythm, a life shared, even if the heart feels absent. But something inside you knows. You feel it in those rare moments when you catch a glimpse of who you were, the version of you that laughed harder, touched deeper, dreamed louder, and for a moment you ache for that aliveness. Not for someone new, but for the version of yourself that used to feel. It's strange how the comfort you once prayed for can become the very thing that numbs you. At first, you mistake the silence for peace. You think, finally, no more chaos. But slowly, that calm begins to taste like emptiness, and you realize, peace without connection isn't peace, it's surrender. The rituals remain, the meals, the schedules, the routines, but they've lost their heartbeat, because intimacy isn't made of repetition, it's made of renewal. And renewal doesn't come from doing the same things, it comes from feeling them again. Maybe tonight, before you fall asleep, you'll notice something you stopped noticing. The shape of their breathing beside you. The way their hand still moves toward you unconsciously in the dark. The subtle reminder that love isn't gone, it's just been sleeping under layers of habit. And maybe, just maybe, if you can feel that again, even for a moment, you'll remember that the ritual isn't the problem. It's the soul behind it that needs to wake up. There's a reason comfort slowly erases excitement. It isn't a flaw in you, or in them. It's the way the human brain works. When something or someone feels new, your mind floods itself with dopamine. That rush you felt in the beginning, the spark that made every message matter, every glance electric. It was biology applauding discovery. Your nervous system was saying, "Pay attention, this matters." But the brain is efficient. It adapts. Once it has mapped the contours of a person, their voice, their scent, the rhythm of their moods, it stops releasing that chemical applause. It no longer needs to. It has decided you are safe, known, predictable, and safety, though beautiful, is not thrilling. So love begins to flatten, not because it's dying, but because your body has stopped being surprised. Predictability, to your biology, means survival, but to your heart, it can start to feel like silence. Think of it this way. In the beginning, every text is lightning. Weeks later, it's weather. The brain has normalized what was once extraordinary. This isn't disinterested, it's familiarity bias. Your system stops chasing what it already owns. Yet here lies the paradox. The more familiar something becomes, the less we notice it, even if it's precious. It's why sunsets lose magic when you live by the sea. Why laughter sounds softer after 100 nights together. The mind protects you from overstimulation, but in doing so, it dulls wonder. That's why relationships require conscious novelty. Small disruptions, moments that wake the senses again. It doesn't have to be grand. Sometimes it's as simple as a new question asked at dinner, or walking a different path home, or looking at them long enough to actually see them again. Because attention reawakens dopamine, and dopamine reawakens curiosity. Most couples mistake boredom for compatibility. They say, "We're just calm now." But calm without curiosity is emotional anesthesia. It keeps you functioning, but not feeling. To keep love alive, you must learn the art of re-seeing, to notice the familiar as if it were new. Every day, the person beside you is changing. Their thoughts, their fears, their quiet hopes. If you stop exploring them, you stop knowing them. And when knowing stops, desire follows. Neuroscience calls this the prediction error. Your brain releases more dopamine when life surprises it. So the couples who play, who tease, who stay a little unpredictable, they're not childish, they're wise. They understand that the mind needs rhythm, but the heart needs syncopation. Maybe that's why the deepest loves are never perfectly still. They breathe, they shift, they risk small chaos to stay alive, because connection isn't built from repetition, it's built from renewal. So tonight, as you lie there beside the person who once felt like lightning, remember this: the spark was never magic, it was attention, and attention can be practiced again. All it takes is looking softly, as if for the first time. It begins quietly, not as an argument, not as neglected, just silence, the kind of silence that feels neutral at first. A pause between words, a skipped conversation, a small moment where neither of you fills the air anymore. At the start, you tell yourself it's normal, people get busy, love matures. There's comfort in quiet, isn't there? But over time, that quiet starts to feel different, not like rest, but like distance, like walking through a familiar house that somehow feels colder, emptier, though everything is still in its place. You used to talk about everything, the random thoughts that came to you while driving, the dreams that didn't make sense, the fears you didn't want to say out loud. Now you save those thoughts for later. Later never comes, and so, little by little, you begin to live parallel lives, close enough to touch, but no longer reaching. This is how emotional withdrawal begins. It's not loud, it's not cruel, it's quiet, polite, invisible, a slow fading of the need to be seen. And it happens because the nervous system adapts not only to touch or routine, but to emotional presence. When your brain believes it's already known, it stops opening new doors. You stop sharing the small, messy truths that used to build bridges between you. You edit yourself for comfort. You shrink, just enough to keep the peace. At first, this feels safe, like avoiding turbulence during a flight. But the longer you fly straight, the less you feel movement at all. And what is love without movement? Sometimes the silence grows so gradually that you forget what sound used to feel like. You forget how your laughter used to echo, or how their voice once made your body react. You forget that love, when alive, has rhythm. And maybe the most painful part is how mutual it becomes. You both sense it, but neither wants to disturb the fragile stillness. You smile more than you speak. You nod instead of confessing. You hold hands, not because you crave it, but because you remember you should. It's tragic in its gentleness, the slow erosion of intimacy under the weight of politeness, because when love turns quiet, it rarely comes back on its own. Silence protects, but it also isolates. You stop arguing, but you also stop connecting. You stop fighting, but you also stop caring enough to fight. And beneath that fragile peace, something begins to ache, a quiet longing for chaos, for tension, for anything that feels alive. But you swallow it, telling yourself you should be grateful. After all, isn't this what everyone wants? No drama, no pain, no fear, just calm. Yet calm without connection is emptiness disguised as peace. It's not love growing wise, it's love falling asleep. So tonight, if you notice the silence, really notice it. Don't rush to fill it, don't pretend it's nothing, just listen. There's meaning in that quiet, a message trying to reach you. Because love rarely dies with noise. It fades in the moments when no one is brave enough to speak. At some point, you stop realizing that the silence has weight. It just becomes the air you breathe. You tell yourself this is what peace looks like: calm mornings, quiet dinners, no conflict. You've built a life so steady that even your emotions have learned to whisper. But there's a difference between peace and emptiness, and your body knows it. It knows every time you look at them and feel nothing rise. It knows when you reach for their hand out of habit, not hunger. It knows the difference between comfort and connection, even when your mind refuses to name it. This is the stage where emotional absence begins to masquerade as stability. You both perform the choreography of love, flawlessly checking in, saying goodnight, asking about the day, but none of it lands. The words float across the space between you, like paper boats on still water, beautiful, fragile, but going nowhere. It's strange how absence can exist inside presence. You can be next to someone every single day and still feel completely unseen. It's not about distance measured in steps, but in awareness. When your partner stops feeling you, even while touching you, that's the truest kind of loneliness. And here's the cruel part: our brains mistake numbness for safety. They reward us for predictability. No arguments means we're okay. No crying means we're strong. No discomfort means we're in control. But the cost of that control is aliveness. Peace without vulnerability is just avoidance, dressed nicely. You can't build depth while avoiding disturbance. True peace isn't quiet, it's clarity. It's knowing you can speak the truth and still be held. It's being able to say, I miss us without fear that it'll break something. Many couples never reach that kind of peace. They stop long before it. They settle for stillness, because stillness doesn't demand courage. You begin to live inside emotional routines, checking your phone instead of your feelings, smiling instead of questioning, reassuring instead of connecting. And in that loop, your relationship stops evolving. Because relationships don't die when people change. They die when people stop changing together. You tell yourself, it's fine, we're comfortable, but comfort, when unexamined, is a coffin lined with soft fabric. It holds you gently as you stop growing. Still, there's something sacred about realizing this, about seeing the quiet truth without judgment. It means you're waking up. It means your heart is whispering, I'm still here. Because emotional absence isn't permanent. It's an invitation. It's life asking, do you still want to feel? And if you do, the first step isn't to fix the relationship, it's to wake up inside it. To start noticing what you've stopped noticing. The tremor in your own voice. The longing behind their silence. The small ways love still tries to reach you, even through the walls you both built for protection. Peace without depth feels easy, but empty. Depth without peace feels chaotic, but alive. Somewhere between those two, love is waiting, patient, quiet, hoping you'll remember that safety was never the goal. The goal was always to feel. There's a story many people tell themselves once the passion fades. They call it maturity. They say things like, real love isn't fireworks, it's calm. Or, we've grown past the need for excitement. And for a while, that story feels comforting. It makes the silence sound wise. It turns emotional distance into a sign of evolution. But sometimes what we call maturity is just fear in disguise. Fear of conflict, fear of desire, fear of being vulnerable again, fear of wanting something deeper than stability. Emotional maturity doesn't mean you stop feeling intensely. It means you've learned how to hold intensity without running away. But many people confuse numbness with mastery. They think they've outgrown the chaos of passion, when in truth, they've just stopped allowing themselves to feel. It's easier to say, I'm calm now, than to admit, I've grown detached. Easier to call indifference peace than to confront the possibility of loss. So we hide behind the language of reason. We use logic as armor. We say, we've matured, as if emotional stillness were a mark of wisdom rather than fatigue. The problem with this lie is that it kills curiosity. And without curiosity, there is no lovingly management. You start managing the relationship the way you manage your schedule. Everything predictable, polite, and under control. But love doesn't thrive in control. It thrives in awareness. And awareness means allowing discomforting truth touch you again. Real emotional maturity is not detachment. It's staying open when you have every reason to close. It's looking at your partner with the same softness you had in the beginning, even when familiarity tempts you to look away. It's having the courage to say, something feels off, instead of pretending everything's fine. It's also realizing that closeness isn't a static achievement. It's a living rhythm that must be nurtured, even when it feels inconvenient. Because love isn't self-sustaining, it needs tending. And pretending otherwise is how couples slowly drift apart while congratulating themselves for being mature. Sometimes we mistake emotional dullness for evolution because it feels safer than desire. Desire asks for risk. It asks for presence. It asks for you to stay awake inside the relationship. And being awake means you will feel everything. The joy, the uncertainty, the ache. That's not immaturity. That's being alive. So when people say, real love is calm, remember, calm can mean many things. Sometimes it's the peace that comes from trust. Other times, it's the silence that follows surrender. You'll know the difference by how alive you feel in that calm. If your peace feels full, if you can still laugh deeply, touch freely, and dream together, then yes, that's maturity. But if your peace feels empty, if you no longer feel the pulse of emotion beneath it, then that's not wisdom. That's withdrawal disguised as grace. True maturity doesn't dull your senses. It refines them. It doesn't make love smaller. It makes it steadier. And steadiness without warmth is not wisdom, it's fear, painted white. So ask yourself tonight, are you peaceful, or are you just quiet? Have you grown, or have you gone numb? Because sometimes the greatest act of maturity is admitting that what you called peace was just your heart learning how to hide. There's a paradox in love that few people talk about, how the same calm that once felt grounding can begin to suffocate, and how the same passion that once felt intoxicating can turn destructive when misunderstood. Most relationships begin with that fire, the pulse, the urgency, the thrill of being wanted. It's a kind of intoxication. Your nervous system lights up. Your body releases dopamine like you've discovered meaning itself in another person's skin. And in those early months, peace feels boring, almost unnatural. You crave the rush. You crave the emotional chaos that tells you you're alive. But time softens everything. The chemistry fades, the familiarity grows, and one day you find yourself mistaking stillness for love, and longing for stability that no longer vibrates with life. Here's where the real confusion begins, when the absence of passion starts to feel like safety, and passion itself begins to look like danger. You start telling yourself you don't need that intensity anymore, that real love is gentle, rational, calm. And yes, love should be gentle, but it should also be alive. It should breathe and change and tremble and heal. Without the pulse of curiosity, even the safest love eventually starves. Passion and peace were never meant to be opposites. They are two sides of intimacy. Peace grounds love, passion keeps it awake, and when either side dominates, imbalance appears. Some people, afraid of chaos, choose control. They build walls so high around peace that even love can't climb in. Others, terrified of boredom, chase the high confusing volatility for connection, believing that only the dramatic can prove devotion. Both are illusions. Peace without vulnerability is numbness. Passion without trust is self-destruction. But when they meet in balance, something extraordinary happens. Love becomes consciousness, because real passion isn't chaos. It's not screaming or jealousy or desperate cling. It's the deep, quiet fire that comes from being seen, from knowing that your soul can unfold without being punished for it, from being able to reveal your chaos to someone who doesn't run away. And real peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of emotional safety, the freedom to say, I'm hurt, I'm scared, I still want you, without shame. When both coexist, love doesn't feel like addiction or avoidance. It feels like breathing in sync with another human being. You don't crave them out of emptiness. You connect from awareness. You don't seek escape in their arms. You find presence there. The tragedy is that many couples lose this balance slowly. They label the fire as immaturity, and the quiet as wisdom, until one day they wake up strangers to calm bodies, no heartbeat between them. They've built a peace so perfect that even love stopped visiting. So if you've started calling peace your goal, pause and listen. Ask yourself, is your peace vibrant or dull? Does it expand you or contain you? Because not all calm is healing. Some calm is just the absence of life. True emotional maturity doesn't extinguish passion, it integrates it. It allows peace to hold space for desire without fear, and desire to awaken peace without chaos. When that balance returns, you stop mistaking stillness for love. You stop craving drama just to feel alive. You stop fearing comfort as a trap. And that's when love becomes something timeless. Not a feeling that fades, but a rhythm that evolves. If peace is the breath of love, then passion is its heartbeat. Without both, the relationship might look alive, but it's only sleepwalking. It doesn't happen in a single moment. It never does. There's no argument, no betrayal, no door slam, just a slow, nearly invisible drift. The kind that begins quietly, like dust settling over something sacred. You don't even notice at first, because it looks so much like calm, it feels so much like safety. You still care for each other. You still share the same bed, the same routine, the same I love you. But somewhere between the good mornings and the good nights, you stopped reaching. Emotional safety is what every relationship craves, but few understand what it actually means. It's not just comfort, it's the freedom to say the wrong thing and not be punished, to express fear and not be shamed, to be fully seen and still fully loved. In the beginning, emotional safety feels effortless. You share your thoughts like confessions. Your laughter spills naturally, and your partner's eyes feel like shelter. But as time passes, something subtle shifts. You start filtering yourself, not out of deceit, but out of caution. You stop saying the small things that might cause discomfort. You trade honesty for harmony. And each time you withhold a truth, a small thread in the fabric of intimacy unravels. Safety without truth is an illusion, because love that never risks discomfort eventually stops growing. You may think you're protecting the relationship by avoiding the hard conversations, but what you're actually protecting is your fear of disconnection. You're shielding yourself from rejection, not nurturing connection. It's human nature to avoid pain. But in relationships, avoiding pain also means avoiding depth. When you no longer share your insecurities, your longings, your anger, you begin to live beside each other instead of with each other. The drift is quiet but relentless. You stop asking questions that matter. You replace emotional intimacy with functional teamwork. Bills, errands, schedules, they all take priority. And soon, you're two people running a life together, but not living it together. You might think, at least we don't fight. But fighting isn't what breaks couples. Disconnection is. Fighting means there's still something burning, some part of you that wants to be heard. But when that fire goes out, when silence becomes the new peace, that's when the distance turns permanent. Emotional safety isn't about the absence of tension, it's about the presence of truth. It's the invisible bridge that allows vulnerability to cross. And when that bridge weakens, everything else begins to wobble. Trust, desire, closeness, joy. You start living inside routines that feel safe but numb. You hug, but it's mechanical. You kiss, but it's muted. You talk, but you don't connect. And every time you choose not to speak your truth, you step 1 inch further from your own heart. But here's the thing, the drift doesn't mean love is gone. It just means love is waiting for you to return to the risk it requires. Because safety without honesty is a soft prison, and the only way out is vulnerability, that terrifying, liberating act of being real again. Love doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for presence. And sometimes, the bravest way to be present is to admit that somewhere along the way, you drifted. The good news, you can find your way back, but not through comfort, through truth. There's a moment, subtle but undeniable, when love shifts from being lived to being performed. You still show affection, still say the right things, still post the photos that suggest harmony, but deep down, you're not feeling it the same way anymore. You're maintaining it. It doesn't start with deceit. It starts with self-preservation. You sense that something between you has weakened, and instead of confronting the truth, you start compensating for it. You smile more, you laugh louder, you perform connection so convincingly that even you begin to believe it for a while. This performance is quiet and well-intentioned. It's what we do when we fear loss more than emptiness, because pretending feels safer than breaking something open. But every performance has a cost, and the price of pretending in love is authenticity. When you perform closeness, you stop being close. Every touch becomes choreography. Every I love you becomes a line rehearsed from memory. You're not lying to your partner, you're lying to your own heart, rehearsing stability in a story that's already losing pulse. You might think, at least I'm keeping things peaceful, but peace built on pretense is fragile. It breaks in silence, not in storms. It fractures in the small moments, when your eyes meet and you both look away too quickly, when your body tenses before a kiss, when laughter feels delayed, as if waiting for its cue. In this stage, love becomes a script. You've memorized your parts so well that spontaneity feels foreign. You begin to rely on gestures that used to be genuine, the hand on the shoulder, the goodnight text, the compliment at dinner. They still happen, but now they lack warmth. They're echoes of what used to be alive. It's not because you've stopped caring. It's because somewhere along the way, you stopped feeling safe enough to be honest. You're afraid that if you speak, if you admit the distance, the performance will end on with it, the illusion of love's stability. So you keep acting. And the stage lights of routine glow brighter than ever. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, every one a scene you've rehearsed. But behind the curtain, your soul begins to ache for something real again. Not excitement, not novelty, just truth. Because truth, even when it hurts, is oxygen. Without it, the relationship suffocates under the weight of politeness. You start to crave unscripted moments, the laughter that isn't planned, the hug that doesn't need a reason, the conversation that starts with, "I don't know what's happening to us, but I miss you." That's where love can begin again, not in perfection, but in honesty. The irony is that both of you are often performing for the same reason, because you care, because you don't want to hurt the other, because you remember how it used to feel, and you're terrified of admitting that you can't find your way back there. But the path back to love doesn't start with pretending harder. It starts with pausing the performance, with stepping off the stage and standing together, bare, awkward human, When you both stop acting, something miraculous happens. The silence doesn't feel like distance anymore. It feels like truth. And in that raw space, connection can breathe again. Love is not about always feeling close. It's about being real enough to rebuild closeness when it fades. So if you find yourself performing, take a quiet moment and whisper to yourself, I don't need to act love to be loved, because the truest form of safety comes not from perfection, but from permission to stop pretending and to simply be. There comes a point in every relationship when affection turns into habit. It's subtle at first, so gentle you don't even notice it happening. You still kiss, still hug, still say I love you, but the gestures start to sound like echoes of something that once had meaning. An emotional echo feels familiar, but hollow. It's the sound of love repeating itself, long after its energy has faded. It's what happens when touch remains, but presence doesn't. When warmth is replaced with rhythm. When you're not feeling anymore, only remembering. You still perform affection because it feels right, because you love the person, because routine brings comfort. But inside, there's a small, quiet knowing that something essential is missing. That the closeness feels scripted, that the intimacy feels thin. You notice it in the pauses, in the silence after the kiss, in the way your body doesn't lean in the same way it used to. You notice it when laughter feels polite instead of contagious, when I love you sounds more like reassurance than revelation. And yet, you stay kind, you stay gentle, you keep doing all the things that look like love, because this is how good people lose connection, not through betrayal, but through repetition. The nervous system adapts to everything, even affection. The same gesture repeated without emotional renewal becomes invisible. Like background noise, your mind learns to tune out. The brain stops releasing the hormones that once made those moments electric. It saves its energy for novelty, for surprise, for presence. And so, to the body, love starts to feel like silence. And to the heart, that silence feels like loneliness. But this isn't the death of love. It's simply the moment where awareness becomes necessary again. Because affection is not emotion, it's a language. And when it's repeated without intention, it loses meaning. You can't keep saying I love you the same way and expect it to echo forever. Even words need air to breathe. What once felt like connection now feels like echo, because the emotional current beneath it has gone still. And stillness, without renewal, becomes stagnation. The tragedy is that most couples mistake this for failure. They think something's wrong with them. They wonder if they've fallen out of love. But really, what's happening is much more human. They've stopped seeing each other. Seeing is not looking, it's noticing. It's touching someone with awareness again. It's letting your attention rest on them like it did in the beginning, when every small detail felt sacred. Their laugh, their tone, their scent, their presence. Affection dies not from absence, but from blindness. It dies when we stop being curious about what we already have. To bring it back, you don't need grand gestures or planned romance. You need presence, a slow, deliberate return to noticing. Touch them and feel your hand there. Kiss them and listen to the silence after. Say I love you and mean it as if for the first time, not as a routine, but as an offering. When affection regains intention, it regains life. The echo becomes a heartbeat again. And that heartbeat, even if soft, is enough to remind both of you that love was never about keeping the flame constant. It was about learning how to relight it, again and again, with gentleness, with courage, with truth. Because affection without presence is noise, but affection with awareness is resurrection. There's a strange kind of loneliness that can only exist in touch, the kind that happens when two bodies meet, but the hearts beneath them don't. You've probably felt it before, that soft, almost imperceptible disconnect. You hug, you kiss, you hold hands, and yet, something inside feels untouched. It's as if your skin remembers the gesture, but your soul has stopped reacting to it. Physical closeness without emotional presence is like music without sound. The movement is there, the form remains, but the melody, the pulse of meaning, has vanished. Touch, when real, is a conversation. It's one person saying, I see you, and the other responding, I feel you. But when love turns mechanical, touch becomes translation instead of connection. It says, I'm here, but means, I don't know how to reach you anymore. You can share a bed and still feel miles apart. You can kiss someone every day and not remember what it feels like to tremble. This isn't because love has disappeared, it's because attention has. Your nervous system doesn't respond to routine, it responds to presence. It recognizes intention, attention, emotion. It feels when your mind is there, when your body is listening. But when touch becomes habit, the body stops hearing it. It stops believing it's a message. Over time, that kind of touch doesn't comfort, it confuses. You start wondering why warmth doesn't reach you anymore, why a hug feels polite, why intimacy feels muted. You start missing what you can't even name, not passion, not novelty, but depth. Because what makes touch sacred isn't the act itself, it's the awareness within it. It's the energy behind the fingertips, the emotion between the breaths, the pause between the words that say, "I'm still here." When awareness fades, even the most tender moments lose their pulse. You can't fake energy the body knows. It can feel when touch carries intention, and when it's offered only out of duty. And no matter how gentle, touch without connection quietly teaches the body to close. That's why numbness grows quietly between couples, not from lack of contact, but from lack of presence in contact, from reaching out without truly reaching in. To reconnect, the answer isn't more touch, it's truer touch. It's remembering that connection doesn't start with the skin. It starts with attention. Look at them, really look. Notice the weight of your own hand resting on theirs. Notice their breathing, their warmth, the small ways their body speaks. Touch slowly, without agenda. Let your body remember that this isn't routine, it's communication. Because touch, when it's conscious, heals. It reminds the body that it's still safe to open, that it's still worth feeling. That love isn't lost, just waiting to be reawakened. And here's the quiet truth most people avoid. When touch feels empty, it's not a sign of the end, it's a signal of disconnection, asking to be heard. If you listen to it with softness instead of fear, you'll notice it's not saying we're over. It's saying, come back to this moment, to each other, to yourself. Touch was never meant to be maintenance, it was meant to be meaning. And when meaning returns, even the simplest gesture, a hand on the shoulder, a kiss on the forehead, can feel like a heartbeat rediscovered. Because true touch isn't physical, it's spiritual. It's one soul reminding another, you still matter to me. Desire doesn't die with time, it dies with familiarity. Not because you stop loving the person, but because your brain stops being curious about them. In the beginning, curiosity drives everything. Every glance is discovery, every word, a window into mystery. You don't just want them, you wonder about them. And that wonder is what keeps the body awake, what makes the touch electric, what makes the air between two people feel alive. But when love becomes safe, and then predictable, desire starts to fade. Not instantly, but softly, like the dimming of a candle after a long night. You still care, you still find them beautiful. You just stop feeling the spark that once made you ache to be near them. At first, you don't worry. You tell yourself, this is what mature love looks like. And to some extent, you're right. Real love does evolve beyond the frenzy of early attraction. But the mistake we make is assuming that comfort and passion cannot coexist. Comfort, when left unchecked, becomes a blanket that smothers fire. It's warm, it's safe, but it also limits oxygen. Desire needs space to breathe. A little mystery, a little distance, a little risk. You can't long for someone you feel you already own. And that's what time does. It convinces you there's nothing left to discover. But love, in its truest form, is infinite. Because people are infinite. They change, they unfold, they grow in directions we can't always see. The problem is, we stop looking. We stop paying attention to the subtleties, how their voice sounds when they're thinking, how their energy shifts when they're lost in something they love, how their silence sometimes means I'm scared, not I'm fine. When you stop observing, curiosity fades. When curiosity fades, desire follows. Not because love is gone, but because love without curiosity becomes friendship. And that's the quiet heartbreak of so many relationships. They transform into companionships too soon. Two people who used to crave each other now exist as caretakers of each other's comfort. The tragic part is that this shift feels responsible. You think you're doing the right thing by being steady, patient, reliable, and you are. But passion doesn't die from neglect. It dies from routine disguised as virtue. Desire needs unpredictability, not chaos, but presence. The kind of presence that keeps you alert, that reminds you the person beside you is still an unfolding story, not a completed one. When comfort replaces discovery, you stop seeing your partner as a universe and start seeing them as home furniture, familiar, functional, dependable. But no one ever fell in love with predictability. We fall in love with possibility, and possibility only exists when there's room for uncertainty, when you can still be surprised by the person you thought you already knew. So if you feel the spark fading, don't panic. It's not proof that love is gone. It's proof that love needs oxygen again, that curiosity must return, that you must meet them again, not as who they were, but as who they are now. Ask them a question you haven't asked in years. Look at them as if you didn't know their story. Watch them like you're learning their language for the first time. Because the truth is, comfort and desire can coexist, but only when you stay curious inside the comfort. When you remember that love isn't ownership, it's observation. And every time you stop observing, the spark dims. Every time you choose to see again, it ignites. Desire doesn't vanish, it just waits. For your attention, for your awareness, for your willingness to wander again. It doesn't happen in one night. Desire doesn't vanish like a flame blown out by wind. It fades, slowly, replaced by something quieter and far more dangerous: indifference. At first, you confuse it with peace. You tell yourself it's balance, maturity, maybe even gratitude. But deep inside, something has gone numb. You're not calm, you're uninvested, you're not content, you're disconnected. It starts small. You stop noticing the details you used to adore: the tiny freckle near their lip, the way their laughter used to pull you in. Now, those same things blend into the background, like sounds you've heard so many times they've lost texture. Your mind begins to crave something new, not because you don't love them, but because the human brain is built for novelty. It's wired to awaken in discovery, to light up when something surprises it. And when love loses that spark of surprise, it starts to feel like a rerun, familiar, predictable, safe, and empty. You might notice how your conversations loop, how your routines repeat, how the gestures of affection become scripts you both know by heart. And slowly, you stop showing up fully. You stop reaching, you start coexisting. It's a quiet tragedy to go from lovers to roommates without realizing when the shift began. You still share space, but not stories. You still talk, but not truth. You still touch, but without electricity. The mystery that once pulled you closer now feels unnecessary, and in that absence of mystery, attraction begins to wither. But here's the truth few people can face. Novelty isn't just about new experiences, it's about new energy. It's about surprise, yes, but it's also about awareness. When you first fell in love, you didn't love them because they were new. You loved them because you were present. You noticed every word, every breath, every small moment. You studied them like art, listened like prayer, and in that depth of attention, novelty was born. Over time, as comfort grows, attention fades. You stop looking with curiosity, and they stop revealing what isn't being seen. Love becomes an echo chamber, the same gestures bouncing back and forth until both of you forget what it felt like to truly discover each other. That's when indifference sets in. Not because love has died, but because perception has fallen asleep. The absence of novelty is the birthplace of emotional amnesia. You forget why they moved you. You forget how to look deeper. And the longer you forget, the more love turns into maintenance. A set of tasks to preserve something you no longer feel expanding. Indifference doesn't scream. It whispers. It arrives through long sighs, empty nods, half-listened stories, through evenings that pass without touch, and mornings that start without thought. You think, this is fine, we're stable. But stability without emotional renewal is just stagnation in disguise. The danger isn't that you'll fight, it's that you'll stop caring enough, too. Yet, beneath indifference, there's always a spark waiting to be remembered. A spark that doesn't need something new, only someone awake. Novelty can be reborn through attention, through looking again, differently, through curiosity, not for who they were, but for who they're becoming. Ask them what they're afraid of now. Ask them what makes them feel alive lately. Notice something you stopped noticing: their tone, their hands, their energy. Let your awareness carve new paths in familiar ground. Because love doesn't die from age, it dies from blindness. And when you learn to see again, when you choose curiosity over comfort, presence over pattern, the spark doesn't just return, it deepens. What you thought was indifference was only a pause, waiting for you to wake up. Resentment rarely enters loudly. It doesn't arrive through shouting matches or slammed doors. It slips in quietly, dressed as patience, disguised as kindness. You tell yourself you're being understanding. You tell yourself it's not worth the argument. You tell yourself love means forgiveness, tolerance. compassion. And yet, somewhere under that soft tone and tired smile, something starts to rot. It begins as a subtle imbalance, a favor unreciprocated, a feeling dismissed, a need minimized. You let it go, because you don't want to seem demanding, because you're tired of explaining, because peace feels easier than honesty. But every time you swallow your truth, you teach your heart that it doesn't matter, and it remembers. It keeps a quiet record, not out of vengeance, but out of grief. Resentment is grief that was never expressed. It's the mourning of your own voice, the slow suffocation of unmet needs. At first, you might even mistake it for maturity. You tell yourself, I've learned to stay calm, but beneath that calmness lies a storm of unspoken things. All the moments you felt unseen, all the times your generosity was met with indifference, all the pieces of yourself you gave up to keep the peace. And the more you deny it, the heavier it gets. Until one day, you don't feel kind anymore. You feel cold, detached, silent. You still say, it's fine, but it doesn't sound like care. It sounds like surrender. This is the hidden decay inside many long-term relationships. It's not infidelity, not betrayal, but emotional debt. A slow accumulation of small moments where one partner gives more than they receive, and love turns into quiet exhaustion. You stop asking for what you need because you've stopped believing you'll get it. You stop expressing pain because you've learned it only leads to misunderstanding. You stop hoping for change because hoping hurts more than silence. And then, resentment begins to crystallize, not as hatred, but as numbness. You start protecting yourself from disappointment by expecting nothing. You start giving out of obligation, not joy. You start loving politely, as if love were a chore you perform out of habit. But the truth is, resentment isn't proof that love is gone. It's proof that you've been too quiet for too long. It's your heart's last attempt to be heard. It's your unmet truth asking for light. To heal resentment, you don't need to blame. You need to reveal. You need to let honesty breathe again. That doesn't mean unloading anger. It means confessing what's beneath it. The hurt, the longing, the fatigue of carrying unspoken things. It means saying, I miss feeling understood. Or, I need to feel wanted again. Or even, I'm tired of pretending I'm okay when I'm not. True kindness doesn't hide truth. It holds it gently. Because love built on suppression can only last as long as your endurance. And no one can endure forever. So if you feel resentment growing quietly between you, don't shame yourself for it. See it as a signal, a flare from the part of you that still wants connection. Because apathy doesn't ache, only hope does. And if you still ache, it means you still care. You still believe in what once was, and maybe what could still be. Resentment isn't the end. It's an invitation to return to honesty, to speak without fear, to stop mistaking silence for love. Because love that costs your voice isn't peace, it's quiet despair. And the only way out is truth, spoken softly, but finally spoken. When truth is silenced, love begins to starve. It doesn't collapse all at once. It fades, one unspoken word at a time. You think you're protecting the relationship by keeping things gentle, by avoiding tension, by staying agreeable. But each moment of silence takes a piece of you with it. At first it feels noble. You tell yourself, I'm being patient, or I'm choosing peace over drama. But what you're really choosing is distance over depth. Because intimacy cannot breathe where truth is buried. Every relationship has two conversations. The one that's spoken, and the one that's felt. When these two drift too far apart, you enter the quiet breakdown, the stage where words are still exchanged, but meaning no longer lands. You talk about daily things, the errands, the plans, the bills, but not about the ache that lives between you. You stop sharing the unscripted thoughts, the messy emotions that once made your connection real. And even though everything looks stable from the outside, inside, something fragile begins to decay. Suppressed truth always finds a way to leak out. It seeps into tone, into body language, into energy. You start to feel it in the pauses, in the sighs that follow every "it's fine." You start noticing the slight hesitation before you speak, the way you edit yourself mid. It's not dishonesty, it's fear disguised as maturity. And fear, over time, becomes the quiet undertow that pulls two people apart. Because truth doesn't disappear when you hide it. It waits, it lingers between you, dense and invisible, turning every touch into translation, every silence into interpretation. You start wondering if they can sense it, if they know something's missing, if they too Feel the subtle emptiness that no amount of kindness can fill. When you stop being emotionally transparent, your partner stops being emotionally responsive. They can't connect with the version of you that's always okay. They can't hold what you refuse to reveal. And eventually, both of you stop trying, not out of malice, but exhaustion. Love without honesty becomes choreography. Every move correct, every expression polite, but the music gone. To speak truth is to risk everything, but to hide it is to lose everything slowly. It's not about confrontation, it's about communion, about saying, this is what's real for me, and trusting the connection enough to survive that revelation. True intimacy isn't born from perfection, it's born from exposure. It's the courage to show what's beneath the smile, to say, I'm not fine, and to let that vulnerability open a door instead of close one. When you choose silence, you choose control. When you choose truth, you choose connection. And yes, sometimes truth will shake the ground beneath you, but it's better to tremble together in honesty than to stay steady in illusion. Because the silence meant to protect love is often the very thing that suffocates it. The moment you speak again, really speak, even if your voice trembles, something ancient in the relationship stirs. That's not destruction, that's renewal. The truth doesn't end love, it gives it oxygen. And when love breathes again, you realize the risk was never about losing the other person. It was about finding yourself inside the love again. One of the quietest traps in modern relationships is mistaking compatibility for connection. It feels logical, safe, even ideal. You meet someone who shares your values, your tastes, your goals. You like the same music, eat the same food, even agree on how the world should work. Everything fits. On paper, it's perfect. And for a while, that harmony feels like love. You think, finally, someone who understands me. But what's really happening isn't understanding, it's alignment. You've met someone whose patterns mirror yours. Someone who makes you feel safe because they don't challenge your edges. But love was never meant to be frictionless. Real connection doesn't exist in the echo, it exists in the exchange. Compatibility makes things easy. Connection makes them alive. You can build an entire relationship on shared interests and still feel unseen. Because connection isn't about what you have in common, it's about how deeply you're willing to be known. And being known requires vulnerability, not similarity. Compatibility is built on comfort. Connection is built on curiosity. The illusion begins when the relationship feels perfect. When you say, we never fight, we think the same way about everything. It sounds romantic, but often it's a sign of emotional dormancy, to people avoiding depth for the sake of harmony. True connection doesn't fear difference. It's not threatened by opposing views. It invites them. It listens through discomfort. It grows through friction. When you only exist inside similarity, you stop learning each other. You stop growing. You stop feeling the spark that curiosity once created. Sameness dulls the senses, because the mind only stays alert when something feels unpredictable. You don't fall in love with someone because they're a reflection of you. You fall in love because they expand you, because something in their mystery wakes up a part of you that was sleeping. But over time, when routine takes over, the edges that once made you curious begin to fade. You stop asking questions. You stop exploring who they are becoming. And the relationship that once felt electric turns into something predictable, comfortable, yes, but increasingly hollow. Compatibility makes a good partnership. Connection makes a deep one. You can share values without sharing intimacy. You can share hobbies without sharing vulnerability. And if all you ever share is what you already know, you stop discovering who you could become together. The truth is, connection requires tension. It requires two people willing to stay present through their differences, to listen even when it's uncomfortable, to stay curious even when it's easier to assume. Because love doesn't die from disagreement, it dies from apathy, from the belief that there's nothing left to learn about the person beside you. The illusion of compatibility is safety without discovery. It feels peaceful, but it's sterile. It's the relationship equivalent of a room with perfect temperature and no air. Comfortable, but lifeless. So if you find yourself thinking, we're so alike, pause for a moment and ask, do I still know who they are beneath the similarity? Have I stayed curious about who they're becoming? Because the more you assume you already know someone, the less of them you truly see. Real love isn't about finding your mirror. It's about finding your reflection in motion, the kind that keeps changing and keeps inviting you to change too. Sameness soothes the ego, difference feeds the soul. And between those two, The heartbeat of real connection lives always growing, always questioning, always becoming new. Harmony sounds beautiful. It's what every couple claims to want, the absence of chaos, the ease of agreement, the comfort of sameness. But there's a kind of harmony that doesn't heal, the kind that hides the silence between two people who have stopped being honest. It begins innocently enough. You stop correcting small things. You nod even when you disagree. You hold your tongue when something stings, because you've convinced yourself that love means peace, and peace means quiet. But love is not silence. Love is aliveness, movement, pulse, contradiction, curiosity. And when a relationship becomes too harmonious, it begins to lose the friction that keeps it real. You may not argue anymore, but that doesn't mean you understand each other. You may not shout, but that doesn't mean you're heard. Many couples confuse emotional neutrality for maturity. They say, "We never fight," as if it were proof of wisdom. But sometimes, never fighting is just emotional avoidance in disguise. A silent agreement that honesty is too dangerous, and that peace, even if it's fake, feels safer than truth. When harmony turns into emotional avoidance, you begin to live in parallel lines, close enough to look connected, but never touching at depth. You stop challenging each other's perspectives. You stop asking, "What do you really feel?" And slowly, your relationship becomes like background music, pleasant, familiar, but no longer stirring anything inside you. There's no intensity left, no hunger, no spark, no emotional gravity, just a polite coexistence where both people are afraid to disturb the illusion of calm. But here's the paradox. Conflict isn't the opposite of harmony. It's the soil where real harmony grows. Because harmony that avoids truth isn't peace, it's paralysis. Healthy love breathes through honesty. It requires tension, dialogue, confrontation, repair. The beauty of harmony lies not in sameness, but in the rhythm created when two different melodies learn how to coexist. When you silence yourself for too long, you don't just lose your voice, you lose your presence. You start to disappear inside the relationship, showing up physically but fading emotionally. You might find yourself smiling during conversations that no longer reach you, nodding to maintain comfort, pretending to listen while your mind wanders somewhere quieter, somewhere you can still hear yourself think. And that's the cost of false harmony. It preserves the appearance of connection while erasing the experience of being alive inside it. Real harmony doesn't come from never disagreeing. It comes from disagreeing safely, from being able to express the raw, the messy, the uncertain, and still feel loved through it. The most bonded couples aren't the ones who always see eye to eye. They're the ones who stay curious even when they don't, who can sit in the discomfort of difference and still reach for each other. Not out of fear, but out of faith. That truth doesn't break love, it deepens it. If your relationship feels peaceful but dull, if you feel calm but unseen, that's not harmony, that's distance dressed up as serenity. Harmony should sound like a heartbeat, not a hum. It should move you, challenge you, stretch you. It should make you feel alive, not anesthetized. So ask yourself, when was the last time your truth met theirs? When was the last time you risked peace to speak what's real? Because love that never trembles, never deepens. And the kind of harmony worth keeping is the one that learns how to hold tension without losing tenderness. That's the balance, not a still surface, but a steady rhythm between honesty and care, between self-expression and empathy. Too much peace can become distance, but the right kind of friction, the honest kind, the human kind, that's what makes two hearts stay awake. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no single night when you stop knowing the person beside you. It's a slow unknowing, a quiet unraveling that happens in the pauses between ordinary days. You wake up next to them and everything looks the same. The same bed, the same morning light, the same rhythm. But something feels different. The room is familiar, yet distant, as if you've both become ghosts inside the memory of your own love. You pour coffee, exchange polite smiles, talk about errands, the news, the weather. The conversation flows easily, but it doesn't go anywhere that matters. It stays on the surface, safe, polite, empty. And for the first time, you realize how far you've drifted beneath that calm. It's not that you've stopped loving them. It's that the version of them you love no longer feels present. You remember who they were, but you can't seem to touch who they are now. They've become a stranger you recognize, someone whose gestures are familiar, but whose inner world feels locked behind invisible glass. The hardest part isn't the distance, it's the quiet acceptance of it. How easily two people can adapt to disconnection. How silence, once uncomfortable, begins to feel normal. You learn to live with it. You stop reaching, because reaching starts to feel like shouting into a void. You start talking less, not because there's nothing to say, but because you already know how they'll respond. The mystery is gone, and with it, the desire to explore. You still share a life, but it's more like shared management than shared meaning. You keep the routines running, you pay the bills, you celebrate the anniversaries, but love has become administrative, a system you maintain rather than an experience you live. And yet, there are moments, brief, haunting moments, when something cracks through, when you catch them looking out a window lost in thought, or when you hear them laugh from another room, and for a second, you feel the ache of recognition. You remember what it was like to be inside that laughter, to belong to that gaze. Those moments hurt more than the silence, because they remind you that the stranger beside you was once the most familiar soul in your world. This is the moment most couples never speak about, the quiet grief of still being together, but no longer connected. It's not dramatic enough to be a breakup, but too painful to be ignored. You don't leave, but you're no longer really there either. It's easy to assume this is the end, but in truth, it's the beginning of something important, the moment of awareness. The recognition that love is no longer automatic. That connection requires attention again. Because relationships don't die when people change. They die when people stop rediscovering each other. And every long-term relationship reaches this threshold. The point where you must choose to see again, to meet again, to start again. Not with a new person, but with new awareness. You can't love someone as they were. You can only love them as they are. Right now, in this version of themselves you haven't yet learned. To do that, you must drop the illusion of familiarity. You must look at them like you did in the beginning, with curiosity, not certainty, with wonder, not assumption. Because love that survives time is not built on memory, it's built on rediscovery. And that rediscovery begins the moment you realize you've become strangers. That's not the end of the story. It's the quiet invitation to write a new one. Emotional amnesia doesn't arrive like heartbreak. It doesn't crash, it doesn't burn. It simply erases softly, slowly until love feels like a story you once heard, rather than a memory you lived. You wake up next to someone you've loved for years, and the feeling is still there, but faded like a scent on old fabric, lingering, but no longer alive. You know they matter, you just can't feel why the way you used to. That's emotional amnesia, the gradual loss of emotional memory inside love. Your mind remembers the facts, who they are, what they've done for you, the moments you've shared, but your body or emotional system no longer reacts the same. The spark of warmth that once lit up when they entered the room now flickers faintly, or not at all. This isn't neglect, it's biology. When the brain no longer perceives novelty or emotional depth, it stops tagging experiences with meaning. It stores them, but without color. Over time, your connection becomes a grayscale version of what it once was. The human mind survives through efficiency. It learns to conserve energy. And in relationships, that efficiency can look like emotional distance. You've learned each other's patterns so well that nothing surprises you anymore. You've become emotionally fluent to the point of silence, predicting each other's moods, finishing each other's sentences, but forgetting how to feel them. You're not cold, you're conditioned by repetition, by habit, by the quiet rhythm of sameness. And yet, the heart still aches for what it remembers: the early chaos, the hunger, the mystery. You miss who you were when love made you curious. Not just who they were, but who you became in their presence. That's what emotional amnesia steals: the sense of aliveness that comes from being seen anew. You both start to live inside the memory of love, rather than the experience of it. You keep the photos, the routines, the anniversaries, but emotion fades into nostalgia. The tragedy is that most people accept this as fate. They think, this is what long-term love becomes. But the truth is simpler and far more hopeful. Emotional amnesia isn't the end of love. It's the symptom of love gone unconscious. The antidote is awareness, presence, renewal, rediscovery. To feel again, you must look again. You must see your partner not as the character in your shared story, but as a living, breathing mystery still unfolding beside you. Ask questions you stopped asking. Listen with the curiosity of a stranger. Let your eyes linger longer than comfort allows. Notice how they've changed, and allow yourself to be changed by that noticing. Because love that feels numb isn't dead, it's asleep. And awareness is what wakes it. Emotional amnesia thrives in autopilot. But the moment you bring conscious attention to love, memory returns, not the old one, but a new kind of memory, born from presence. You begin to remember not what you loved, but how you loved openly, vividly, vulnerably. You begin to feel again, not because something returned, but because you did, and in that quiet return, in that soft, trembling moment where recognition meets rediscovery, the stranger beside you becomes familiar once more. That's not nostalgia, that's resurrection. Love remembered not as it was, but as it is, alive again, in awareness. There's a certain silence that settles over a dying relationship. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of paralysis. The kind that keeps two people orbiting around each other, pretending the gravity still exists, when in truth, both are afraid of floating away. You tell yourself you're staying because it's love, because you still care, because history is sacred. But deep down, you know it's fear. Fear of emptiness, fear of regret, fear of that first night alone when the house suddenly sounds louder than usual, and your thoughts start echoing back at you. You see, leaving isn't just about walking out the door. It says about dismantling a whole version of yourself. The you that existed inside that relationship. Every shared memory, every inside joke, every morning routine becomes a ghost. You begin to realize that ending it means killing a small universe you helped build. And so, you stay. You stay because staying doesn't require explanation. You can keep pretending that love is still breathing if you don't listen too closely. You can tell yourself that comfort is enough, that peace means absence of pain, even though what you're really feeling is numbness. Psychologically, the human brain despises uncertainty more than pain. It's wired to choose the familiar, even if it hurts, because predictability feels like safety. That's why people stay in fading relationships long after the warmth is gone. Not because they're happy, but because they're scared of chaos. The mind whispers, "At least I know this pain. I can survive this." Sometimes, that's what attachment becomes, a survival instinct disguised as love. The thought of walking away feels like betrayal, not just of your partner, but of yourself, the version of you that once believed this would last. You wonder if leaving means you failed, if it makes you the villain in a story that was supposed to be sacred. But staying, ironically, is what kills the relationship faster, because when love stops growing, it starts decaying in silence. And the longer you delay change, the more your own reflection starts to fade. You begin to speak softer, dream smaller, shrink into routines that used to feel safe but now only remind you of everything you read not saying. Here's the strange paradox. The comfort that once protected you now imprisons you. The walls you built to preserve love are the same walls suffocating it. And one day, you wake up next to someone who feels more like a memory than a person, and realize that you've been gone longer than they know. So no, staying doesn't always mean loyalty. Sometimes it's fear. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for both of you is to stop pretending safety is the same as connection. When you finally take that first step away, your mind will scream, your body will rebel, the silence will feel unbearable. But underneath it all, something small and pure will start breathing again. The part of you that forgot what freedom feels like. Because maybe love was never meant to be a cage. Maybe it was meant to be a mirror, one that reflects your growth, even when that growth takes you somewhere new. There's a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when love stops being a choice and starts being a habit. You wake up beside someone you once dreamed about, and yet the space between you feels heavy, as if both are silently protecting something that's already broken. You don't fight anymore, not because peace has returned, but because neither of you believes the fight would matter. This is the psychology of settling, the slow, invisible trade between emotional truth and psychological safety. It begins innocently with compromise. You overlook small disappointments, excuse the hollow tone in their voice, ignore the way your body tenses when they touch you. You tell yourself it's maturity. You tell yourself this is what love looks like after the fire fades. But underneath those rationalizations lies something deeper, learned helplessness. In psychology, it's the state where a person stops trying to change their situation because, after repeated disappointments, the brain associates effort with futility. You start believing that things will never truly be different, no matter what you do, and so, you adapt. You normalize discomfort. You shrink your expectations to fit the size of your disappointment. The mind calls this peace. The soul knows it's surrender. What's tragic is that people who settle down usually realize they've redone it. It's a gradual erosion of hope, not a single decision. You stop planning weekends, stop sharing ideas, stop showing your unfiltered self. You become polite versions of who you once were, smiling just enough to keep things functional. From the outside, you look stable. Inside, you're surviving. It's the emotional equivalent of breathing through a straw, just enough to stay alive, never enough to feel alive. Settling doesn't always mean you chose wrong. Sometimes it means you stopped choosing at all. The relationship became autopilot, and autopilot became identity. You convince yourself that passion is overrated, that deep connection is unrealistic, that maybe you're asking for too much, but you're not. You're re-asking for aliveness, and that's the one thing you were designed to need. The truth is, settling is safer than starting over because it spares you the chaos of rediscovery. It allows you to stay within the lines of a story that already has an ending written, even if that ending suffocates you. To begin again means rewriting yourself, redefining your worth, rebuilding your emotional map, and facing your loneliness with open eyes. And that's terrifying, because no one teaches us how to be new again. But the cost of not trying is even greater. When you settle, you abandon the very thing that once made you capable of love, your curiosity. You stop wondering who your partner could become, and you stop wondering who you could become. Love turns into maintenance. Connection becomes memory. If you're listening to this and it sounds familiar, don't rush to fix it. Just notice that quiet awareness the moment you admit, I've been living half alive. That's where healing begins. Because awareness breaks patterns. It restores choice. And maybe, one day, you'll realize that love isn't meant to be endured. It's meant to evolve. And if it no longer grows, then walking away isn't failure. It's fidelity to truth, to vitality, to yourself. So breathe. Let the fear tremble inside you without shame. Let the unknown stretch before you like an ocean. Because it's there in that vast, trembling space beyond safety, where you finally meet the part of yourself that still remembers how to feel. There's a strange kind of death that doesn't make noise. It happens slowly, behind closed doors and calm smiles. You keep showing up to the same dinner table, the same couch, the same bed, but each night, a smaller part of you stops breathing. You tell yourself it's fine, that love isn't supposed to feel exciting forever, that stability is enough. You say, all couples go through this, and maybe that's true, but not all couples lose themselves while pretending to save what's already gone. Psychologically, this is what is known as emotional dissonance, the gap between what you feel and what you pretend to feel. It's exhausting, not because of the effort to love, but because of the effort to fake normalcy. Every I'm fine costs a piece of your authenticity. Every time you bite your tongue to keep the peace, your nervous system learns to associate love with suppression. The body always knows before the mind admits it. Your chest tightens when they enter the room. Your laughter feels mechanical. You crave silence not because you're calm, but because silence means you don't have to perform. Yet even in that silence, you not resting, you grieving a connection that's already turned to dust. And still, you stay. Because the alternative leaving feels like walking into darkness barefoot. Because you remember the version of them that once made you feel alive. Because you hope that if you love hard enough, if you wait long enough, the warmth will come back. That's what the human heart does. It clings to memory even when reality has moved on. What no one tells you is that love can die long before the breakup. That two people can share the same space, the same life, and still live as emotional ghosts of what they once were. You become roommates with shared history, not shared intimacy. You touch, but don't feel. You speak, but don't connect. Staying becomes an act of nostalgia, not love. You're not in the relationship anymore, you're in the memory of it. And that's where the tragedy deepens. Because you're not just losing your partner, you're losing the you that existed with them. The one who dreamed, who believed, who hoped. You start mistaking numbness for maturity, thinking that not crying means you're strong. But numbness isn't strength. It's the mind's way of saying, I can't handle this anymore. So you hold on a little longer. You call it loyalty, but deep down, you know it's fear. Fear that if you leave, you'll have to face what's left when the noise fades yourself. Yet that's where freedom hides, quietly waiting in the aftermath. Because the moment you stop trying to resuscitate what's already dead, you start remembering what being alive actually feels like. When you finally walk away, it won't feel like triumph. It'll feel like collapse. But in that collapse, there's something sacred. The birth of truth. The rediscovery of your own pulse. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the version of you who stayed wasn't weak. They were just afraid of dying alone, not realizing they were already doing it in company. Ending a relationship isn't about slamming doors or shouting final words. Most endings don't sound like endings at all. They sound like quiet mornings where you realize you didn't dream of them this time. They feel like walking home and not needing to check if the lights are on. They're made of silence, not anger, not chaos, just silence that finally feels honest. The hardest part of letting go isn't losing the person, it's losing the story. All those imagined futures, the trips, the milestones, the laughter that never happened. They lived in your mind long before reality ever caught up. And now you're forced to say goodbye, not only to someone you loved, but to the version of life you built around them. That's why ending feels like grief, because it is. Your brain doesn't differentiate between a breakup and a death. The attachment system doesn't understand logic. It only understands loss, so it panics. It floods you with memories, begging you to stay, whispering maybe it wasn't that bad. But that's not love speaking, that's addiction. You're detoxing from the illusion of safety. The courage to end the story is born in stillness, not impulse. It's the moment you sit with yourself and admit, I can't keep doing this. No shouting, no drama, just the quiet truth pressing against your ribs until you finally listen. It's not about hate, it's about dignity, the kind that whispers we deserve better than pretending. When you walk away, part of you will ache to turn back. The mind will replay every good moment like a highlight reel designed to break your resolve. It will remind you of their laugh, their warmth, the early days when everything felt sacred. But what you must remember is this: nostalgia is a selective liar. It edits out the ache, the waiting, the nights you fell asleep feeling invisible. It paints over the cracks because the truth is harder to hold. Courage doesn't mean you stop missing them. Courage means you choose not to return just because you miss who you were with them. Every ending creates a silence, a raw, echoing space that feels unbearable at first. But that space isn't emptiness. It's possibility. It's the ground clearing so something honest can grow again. You'll feel lost, but lost is just what it feels like when you start being honest for the first time in a long time. And one evening, maybe weeks or months later, you'll catch yourself laughing. Not the kind of laughter you perform, but the kind that escapes on its own. And you'll realize you didn't lose love. You rediscovered the capacity to feel it. That's what courage looks like. Not loud, not cinematic, but steady, trembling, and deeply human. You didn't fail by ending it. You simply refused to keep shrinking to fit inside a love that stopped growing. So breathe. Let the story close with grace. Not every ending is tragedy. Some are quiet beginnings, disguised as goodbye. There comes a morning when you wake up, and the first thought in your head, I isn't them. It's quiet. There's no surge of panic, no urge to reach for your phone, no echo of a name that once anchored your entire day. Just breath. The kind you didn't realize you'd been holding for years. At first, that quiet feels strange, like a song missing its chorus. But slowly, you realize it's not emptiness, it's space. Space that was always yours, but had been filled with someone else's noise. For so long, you lived as half of something, half of a conversation, half of a plan, half of an identity built around we. You bent your moods to fit theirs, shaped your days around their preferences, measured your worth through their eyes. Now, without that mirror, you stand there wondering, who am I when I'm not loving someone else? That question can feel terrifying, but beneath the fear, there's freedom. Because remembering yourself isn't about rebuilding who you were before them. It's about meeting who you've become through everything that's happened. You're not the same person who fell in love, nor the one who stayed out of fear. You're the one who survived both. Psychologically, this phase mirrors what therapists call self-reintegration, the process of reclaiming one's personal narrative after codependence. When you detach from someone you once defined yourself by, your brain doesn't just miss them, it loses structure. The familiar cues of identity vanish. That's why people often rush into new relationships, not because they're ready, but because they need a mirror to remember they exist. But real healing asks you to pause, to sit in that mirrorless space until your reflection starts forming on its own. You'll start noticing tiny things first: how you drink your coffee, what music you reach for, which streets you walk just because they make you feel alive. You begin to relearn your rhythms. Your body starts asking for what it actually needs: rest, solitude, play, light. And here's the quiet miracle: joy returns, not as fireworks, but as warmth, small, steady, unexplainable. It might come when you're folding laundry or standing in line at a cafe, when you suddenly realize you feel okay, maybe even content. You start to realize that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering yourself more clearly than ever. You don't have to erase what happened. You just have to stop living as if it's still happening. Some days you'll still feel lonely, and that's fine. Loneliness isn't a void, it's a clearing. It's where you meet yourself again after a long absence. And when you look in the mirror, not to compare, not to judge, but just to see, you'll recognize someone softer, someone wiser, someone who finally learned that peace isn't found in another person's arms, but in your own presence. The world around you will look the same, but you'll move through it differently, slower, calmer, deliberate, not because you're guarding your heart, but because you've learned its value. You'll stop asking if you were hard to love. You'll start asking if you were kind to yourself while trying, because at the end of it all, that's what healing really is. The slow remembering that you were always whole, even when you forgot. Healing doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't knock at your door or announce "we're finally free." It seeps in quietly in the space between moments, in the ease that returns to your breath when you stop trying to fix what isn't broken anymore. There's a strange peace that comes when you stop chasing meaning and start living it. For the first time in a long while, you feel the warmth of sunlight not as a background to someone else's story, but as part of your own. You take a walk and notice colors again, the way trees shift in the wind, how the sky holds 1,000 shades of calm. It's not happiness exactly, it's clarity, a soft awareness that you are still here, and that is everything. To feel alive again doesn't mean returning to who you were before the heartbreak. It means discovering life as it is now, unfiltered. The world hasn't changed, you have. You listen differently, you pause more. You understand that love isn't supposed to consume you, it's supposed to coexist with you. You begin to reclaim the ordinary. Mornings no longer sting, silence becomes gentle. You make coffee, light a candle, open a window, small rituals that become declarations of presence. Each one says, "I'm still here," and that's enough. Psychologically, this is integration, the final stage of emotional recovery. The mind stops looping the story of loss and starts weaving it into your identity. Pain becomes context, not identity. The nervous system, the body begins to trust the world again. You're no longer surviving, you're participating. And then something beautiful happens. Curiosity returns. You catch yourself wondering about the future, not with anxiety, but with quiet anticipation. You realize that your heart, once fractured, didn't harden, it adapted. It learned how to expand without losing itself. The world opens up again. You meet new faces, hear new laughter, and realize that connection isn't about replacing what was lost. It's about discovering what still exists. You don't rush, you don't force meaning. You simply live, not as a reaction to pain, but as a continuation of it. Because the truth is, life was never asking you to be unbroken. It was asking you to be honest. And honesty, as it turns out, feels a lot like peace. Maybe one night you'll look at the stars, the same ones you used to share, and feel gratitude instead of ache. Gratitude for having loved, for having lost, for having lived through it all, and still being capable of softness. Because the ultimate form of healing isn't forgetting, it's loving again, starting with yourself. So tonight, if you're listening to this with your eyes half closed and your heart a little tired, just breathe. You've made it through the noise, through the grief, through the numbness, and now, you're here, present, alive, whole. Not who you were, not who they needed, just you. And that, finally, is enough.